So thank you and welcome, everyone. It's lovely to be with you all. Thank you for joining us tonight. And, some of you are from Australia, some from the world, ready to get free from anxiety. For some of you, you may be already familiar with NLP. And for some of you, this may be the first time you've experienced anything to do with NLP. Either way, there's some fabulous learnings here. So who's here? Do we have any marketers here? Do we have any creatives here? What about business founders? Coaches? Do we have any coaches here? What about people interested in NLP? Creative coaches, I like that, Glenn. What about human beings? Any human beings here? Good. We're all here then. So big topic tonight. In this session, we're going to explore anxiety, what it is and how you do it. The offer here is to be curious to what is possible for you to free yourself from it, to show up in your full potential. A quote from a poem that I love, Marianne Williamson's, and she says, "Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure." We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, talented, fabulous? Who are you not to be? And my question is, what gets in your way? Anyone in their head saying, my anxiety? In the face of that, I'd like to recognise and really count the commitment to yourselves and your own development for attending tonight. So some logistics for tonight before we get into it. You can ask questions through the chat box. Lou's going to be managing those. You can ask Lou direct message questions if you prefer to have a private message, a private question. Let's just test out. I'm loving seeing the chat box action already. It's awesome. It's an interact. The magic is in our interaction tonight. So check out the text box, the chat box. Use it. Hands up symbols if you'd like them to wave or to hands up. Pop a hi in the chat box where you're from, anything that occurs to you that you'd like to talk about. Great to see that in action. Well done. So let's jump in. We've received many questions about anxiety. How can I free myself from anxiety? Why does anxiety make me feel so nervous all of the time? Why does it feel like I'm running on adrenaline all of the time? How do I stay calm when I'm experiencing anxiety? Anyone relate to those questions? Raise your hand if you relate. Yeah, got some yeses, got some hands up. Good job. So what if we told you that the discomfort of what you label as anxiety was your leading edge, your potential, in fact? What if we told you that the anxiety that arises from the discomfort of facing difference and indeed the unknown was in fact healthy? What if anxiety can be framed as your actual potential arising in the moment? Have you ever felt anxious about what isn't possible? What if anxiety had a positive intention to reveal the possibility rather than the probability of you? What if I told you you could upgrade your thinking? Let's just hold that for a moment, just for a minute. We all update our phones, right? Our laptops, our cars, our furniture, our partners, maybe for some of you. And yet we can go through our whole lives running the same type of thinking. Tonight is about that. Tonight it's time for an upgrade. Now, an upgrade doesn't mean there's anything flawed with the previous model, right? It's just got some refinement, some finessed features. The same is true for you in your thinking. Tonight's session is about looking at what anxiety really is. How can we understand it more fully? And how can we, with the use of NLP, manage it to enrich and empower our lives rather than making us feel constantly stressed? Anyone do constant stress with their anxiety? Yeah, show of hands. Good job. Who would like that? Who would like to live a more enriched and empowered life, free from constant stress? So what is NLP? Some of you know what NLP is, but for some of you, what is NLP? And so the best description of NLP is it's getting objective, being able to get objective, stepping outside and being able to look at how you do certain things in a really habitual way. It's being able to look at how you run your own brain. Now, one of the most important things to understand with NLP, we're not trying to fix anything about you. You are not broken. You work perfectly well. NLP gives us the opportunity to see that you have all the resources you need. What needs to happen is for you to be able to access and sequence them accordingly as required. NLP as a developmental model enables us to see how we preference things. How we preference things in our thinking. So, for example, if you're on a big project, you're working on a project, do you preference like the big picture, the global view, or are you really focused on the details, the finer parts of the project? Or if you have to present or do a pitch to a new client, are you thinking worst case, what could go wrong? Or are you thinking best case? And so as a developmental model, we can see how we preference things and it enables us to uncover our pattern behavior and to see what's serving us and what's no longer serving us. It's true that our thinking preferences are our strengths, but can also be our weaknesses. And when we gain flexibility in that thinking, we can reveal our true selves. We have more choice. We have more choice in how we want to show up in the world. There's a saying that I often think of, and it says, is your mind a beautiful servant or a dangerous master? Choice creates a beautiful servant in our thinking. So this is a different way of being for yourselves if you're open to it. A different way of connecting and relating to what you've labelled anxiety and how it plays out in your life. Does that make sense? Show of hands. Raise your hand if that makes sense. Yeah. So, first thing to understand, and if this is your only takeaway tonight, it's a big one. Anxiety is a process. It's not a thing. Anxiety is a process. It's not a thing. Anxiety is something that we do, not something that we have. So most people that experience anxiety are experiencing a process of their own doing. So let's just let that sink in for a bit. It's a process of your own doing. Now, how fabulous is that? Because if we can do something, we can also undo something. If we can do it, we can undo it. By turning it back into a process, we can take responsibility for it. So this is the first thing to learn about anxiety. Realize that anxiety is not something real or solid. It's not a noun. It's a verb. It's a process. It's a doing thing, a set of actions. More accurately, it's a strategy that I run in mind about reality out here, like a map we create in our own mind. And here's how we do it. So we've got an anxiety model that I'm going to introduce to you, got a slide for that coming up. Yeah, awesome. Thank you. And so this is a revised version. Some of you may be familiar with our NLP communication model. This is a model on how we do anxiety. And so we know through NLP that as human beings, we are a collection of habits, a collection of strategies. And our thinking becomes habitual. And then we create strategies that runs this thinking. So if we take the external event, you'll see that up on the slide in the circle, there's an external event. Now, that external event is anything that's happening in the world. So for people that are doing pitches for clients, for example, I've got an example coming up for you shortly. For me meeting with a new client, for me doing a new training, we take an external event. What we do with the anxiety is we take that external event into our neurology, into ourselves, and we filter it. A bit like I filter anything I see through my glasses here. We filter it like a lens through habituated thinking of worst case scenario, together with thinking about the future. So we have an event coming up, for example, we filter it through worst case and future thinking. The what if this happens? What if that happens? What if this goes wrong? What if Zoom breaks down? What if they don't like me? What if I don't build rapport? What if I stutter? What if this happens? And then we play it in our mind. And we play it in our mind like a movie. Now, that movie might be a soundtrack. It might be a felt experience. It might be self-talk. That movie that plays out then creates this energetic experience in the body. Anyone that does anxiety really well as a process, feel it in the body, like it might be in the tummy or the heart might start to race. That's because we filtered it first. We've created a movie of worst case future orientation, the what ifs. It creates this energetic experience in the body. We call it a state of mind that you experience. It might be one of fear, panic, and it plays out then in our physiology. The heart starts racing. It plays out in our behavior. Our voice starts to sound shaky. We start to speak from our throat. So this is the strategy. This is the model how anxiety plays out as a process. Yeah. So an example of that, for example, I was chatting with one of your colleagues in the field that you work in, and she was saying, new client pitch, there's the external event. I've got a new client pitch. First thing I start to filter this new client pitch through is this new client, they haven't met me. What if I bomb out with them? What if I don't deliver on the pitch? What if the client doesn't like me? What if there's no synergy? As I create this movie in mind, what happens for her is she starts to play the movie. It's a visual thing where she's meeting with this client, she's bombing out. The heart starts to race. She then starts to lose her voice. Her speech starts to change. What's happening in the state is there's this confidence affected. And she's playing this movie constantly, days, weeks, hours before the actual event has occurred. How are we going with that information? A lot of information in the anxiety model, right? But if you can just take that away, that this is the process of how you do anxiety. You don't have it, you do it, and this is how. So let's play with that. Let's go through an experience together. And what I want you to do is recall an experience of an external event where you experienced anxiety. It might be a meeting. It might be a difficult conversation. It might be saying no. It might be presenting to a board. Just take a moment in your own minds, in your own space, recall that event. And as you recall that event, just take a moment to let yourself go there, just to access the movie that played out for you, all the what ifs. Notice the cinematic features of that movie, whether it was a self-talk, whether it was a visual thing that was playing out, whether it came in the night when you were trying to sleep, you had that big pitch the next day, and it was playing out and playing out. And then another movie started to play out that, oh God, if I don't get to sleep now, I'm going to be tired and the pitch is going to be even worse. Just recall that and notice what's the first thing you think about. Notice as you played that movie what happened in the body. Just recall the time where you had this energetic, and it's not super nice to reflect on that, but just access that feeling of what that was like for you in the body. And then notice what it was like for you in your behavior, what happened in your actual behavior. As you're recalling this movie, just notice all the modalities of it, all the conversations you had with yourself, the what ifs and how to's. And then what I'd like you to do is think about how could you shift? How could that move for you if there was one leverage point of change? If perhaps when you filtered that pitch through best case, imagine what it would be like if you were actually thinking, this is going to go really well. I'm going to have great rapport with the client. I'm going to be clear and concise. Notice what shifts in the movie that you represent. Notice what shifts in the felt experience. So what's the so what in that, in playing with that, just playing with this event? What's the so what? It's understanding the formula, your strategy of how you do anxiety. Remember, you don't have it, it's a thinking. In understanding your formula of how you do it means you can change it. I mean, this is about getting free. This is about free to run your own brain, getting free to do that, free to run your own thinking, your experiences, and how you show up in the world. So let's look at that formula. Here's how you do the anxiety formula. You think about the future in mind in a pessimistic way, and you think about what the future potentially means for you in that. For example, potentially not meeting a deadline, landing a potential client leads to that fear. So the feeling of fear is the likely feeling that creates the anxiety. So what if you could change the formula? It's like, where's the formula? We want to change this formula. So maybe this webinar is the message for you that it's time for an upgrade. Remember the upgrade part when I first spoke, the phones, the partner? No, I was talking about the partner. Your thinking, right? Upgrading your thinking. Who's thinking, well, how do I do that? Yeah, that's all great, but how? I know this about anxiety already, but how do I upgrade my thinking? This is what NLP is all about. We train people to change how they think and transform their behavior and how they change their experience and their world. So we first start with awareness. Becoming aware of your habitual thinking, becoming aware of doing anxiety, becoming aware of it playing out. As you become awake to this new way of thinking, catching yourself in the act of falling asleep to your old way of being. So awareness is key, starting with awareness. What's your usual indicator that you feel anxious? So for me, my experience was always a felt experience. I thought that was the first indicator, right? But that indicator is for you to choose another way of thinking. Yeah. That indicator is for you to go, what's been happening in my thinking for me to be experiencing this in the body? And how do I know to label this as anxiety? This is just a felt experience. What's the thinking that's come first? Who here thinks of themselves as an anxious person, often saying to friends, oh, I have anxiety. I'm an anxious person. Awareness is about becoming aware that you do anxiety. You are not an anxious person. Do not confuse your identity to the experience of anxiety. Changing that language, changing your experience, changing how you identify with the process of anxiety. One strategy would be to journal your self-talk. Journal it and look at how your language is, how you are moving away from the pain, the shoulds, the have-tos, the musts. Change it to choice-based. I could think this way. I may think that if I choose to, not I have to. Realise that you are the one choosing your thinking. The next step is to recognise anxiety as a skill. If you personally do anxiety, you have a skill. You are capable of performing the strategy of anxiety. A person can get better and better and better at a skill to even to the highest levels of mastery, that they're world class. Skills practice become habits. Anxiety, like other skills, become a habit. Habituation simply means practicing until the process runs itself outside of your awareness. It runs unconsciously. And this unconscious processing, more often than not, has a positive intention. As human beings, that we move towards pleasure and we move away from pain. And so all of our behaviour has a positive intention for the person that's enacting it. So others may not see that, but for the person enacting it, there's a positive intention, regardless of the outcome. So in other words, anxiety has a positive intention regardless on the impact. So for example, you might do anxiety to avoid failure. You might do anxiety so you can get things perfect. You might do anxiety to even motivate yourself. Let's pop some up in the chat box for those who think what their positive intention is for doing anxiety. Why do you do this? Here's my question to that as you identify what, if there was a positive intention, what it would be. Approval, yeah, good job, yeah. To not disappoint others, well done, yeah. Motivation, yeah. Cover all bases, lovely. Skills for practice become. So here's the question to ask yourself about that. Are you getting what you intend? Are you getting that? Or is it the opposite when anxiety runs for you, when you do anxiety as a process? So recognising it as a skill, recognising that there's a positive intention, but realising that the positive intention, you're not necessarily getting that. And we get the opposite. Yeah, good job, Bron. Thank you. And so what you need to do is start thinking and becoming habitual and becoming skilled at thinking that is going to serve you. Yeah. Next point is you can't do anxiety if you stay present. Now, some of you that are curious about anxiety and have researched it will know that. So staying present, going from the future back to now, realise that you are constructing a reality that hasn't happened yet and projecting it into the future as if it's going to happen. And then as you bring it back to the present moment, the realisation, as you stay present, the realisation is that you don't actually know that. You are actually making it up, this future, this projected future that things are going to go terribly. So now it's about deciding, how is this making this up serving me? If not, make it up in a different way. Make it up in a way that serves you. So catching yourself projecting into the future and staying present in the moment, realising you are making up a reality that hasn't happened yet. Being present means being here in this moment, in uptime with your sensory experiences. Your body is very intelligent. It's always here in the present. It can't do tomorrow, next week, or next month. Your body is an anchor for now, hence Lou's breath work that she did at the start of the session. As anxiety starts to play out in mind, grab both of your knees and bring yourself here to this real and present moment. You can ask yourself questions like, what problems are here right now that I need anxiety for? It's not possible to be anxious or do anxiety about this present moment. It's when we start to think about the future. You can experience fear about right now, and you can do something about that right now, can't you? That's fight or flight, where we have to access courage or discernment about the present moment and take action. Next tip might be that we'll change the self-talk, that inner dialogue. Anyone have self-talk? If you've got a little voice saying, what self-talk? That's the one. And so in the field of developmental psychology, self-talk's referred to as the superego. This is the voice where we have all our morals, our ethics, our values. We've modeled things from our parents. And this is where we are moving from childhood to adolescence. And each of us creates a superego so that we can kind of take over from our parents in growing ourselves up. It's part of how we mature, how we become individuals. But this superego can sometimes have a bit of a dark side as well as this light side, and it will often chastise us. Anyone have what we call a self-critic, someone criticising you? Yeah. If you do, pop a yes in the chat box. We'd love to hear from you. Anyone, someone criticising. People who struggle with anxiety will often say things to themselves like, oh, I'm so useless, I'm hopeless, worthless, I'm not good enough. They tend to use language like always, never, nobody. Everybody's going to think I'm dumb at this. Everyone's going to hate my pitch. We call that the voice of the self-critic. And so the offer for tonight is changing your self-talk, exercises to improve that. We're going to send those out to you in email tomorrow. We're going to have 5 tips. So don't frantically feel you have to get these down tonight. We're going to send you out these tips for self-talk. One is to meditate and watch the self-talk. The second one is to journal the self-talk. The third one is to change the voice of the self-talk, to separate yourself from it. Yeah. And we want you to do this for 2 weeks. At the end of each week, identify 0 through 10, how it might change your mood. Just silencing this self-talk, this inner critic. And one increasingly popular habit would be like accessing these positive states of mind and journaling 3 things a day. So that will come to you in an email that's available to you. The next one is know anxiety as your potential. It's only your potential if you know it is, if you are aware of it. So an interesting phenomenon arose for us some years ago around the fact that anxiety is actually an energetic expression of your potential and possibility. Wow. An energetic expression in the body of your potential and your possibility. Let me give you an example of that by giving you a task that I want you to try and do anxiety about this. Just try. Let's play. So the task for you within 24 hours of right now, whatever time it is for you right now, I want you to be physically standing on the planet Mars. Now do anxiety about that. How much anxiety can you do about that, right? Any? None, right? Because your skill of anxiety's fallen away because the fact is you know you cannot do it. And so if you can't do it, you can't do anxiety about it. So your potential lies in this. You can only do anxiety about something that you actually know you can do. So it's reasonable to say that your anxiety is actually an indicator of what you can do, not of what you can't. Just let that inform yourself today that the anxiety is actually an indicator of what you can do, not of what you can't. How awesome. Anything you experience anxiety about is letting you know you can do this. We silence that self-talk, we get awareness. So I'm loving the chat box. Let's speak to some real life scenario questions. We've got them up on some slides that are going to come up. What we've heard from you. We've asked you, what goes on for you? What happens in your day-to-day life? Because this is where the real stuff is. It's like, this is lovely, Madeline, and, but you're not in our industry. You don't know what it's like, yeah? Anyone thinking that? So let's look at some of these questions. How do I unpack my mind to feel calm and more in the moment rather than always feeling on the edge of my seat? Anyone do that? How do I unpack my mind to feel calm? Who'd like to be able to unpack their mind and feel calm? So here's the answer. Stop trying to unpack things. Be where you are. You're not broken. You don't need fixing. Stop future focusing and constructing a future that hasn't happened yet, that you are treating as real. It is a possible reality, not a probable reality. If it's possible, then it's also possible that it can be different. Question 2. What is the first step in changing my mindset? How I feel to maintain long term. So here's the answer. You need to do the work. How can you expect the pay if you won't do the work? And so what that means is to get in and do an NLP course. Invest in yourself. If you want to shift this for yourself, only you can do that. No one else can do it for you. You cannot expect the pay if you don't do the work. So get in and do it. You need to do the work yourself. Next one. What are some simple ways to stay calm that I can initiate every day? That'd be nice, right? Initiate something to stay calm every day. Stay here in the moment. Being mindful. Awareness practice of observing your thoughts. The rubbish that can flow out of your mind that you've got on loop. That it's no longer even within your consciousness. It's just running. This future worst case scenarios that are running, this thinking. The purpose of meditation is so that you can become mindful and see all this stuff running outside of your awareness. As you see it running outside of your awareness, you can bring it into your awareness and change it. Question 4, how do I help those around me calm their anxiety? How do I help people? I've got a member of my team, she just gets so anxious. What do I do, particularly in a high-pressure team environment? What are some ways you can calm others around you? Realize that pressure is an inside job, not an outside job. There's a team environment that exists that you are pressuring yourself with. Pressure can be a motivation strategy that can either motivate or demotivate you. And it's a pattern that we create from childhood as a coping mechanism. And you can update that. And that's what NLP can help you do. Pressure is an inside job. You are pressuring yourself in the face of that team. Lots of information here, I know. Question 5, I live on minimum sleep. Anyone live on minimum sleep? Hands up. Anyone do that? I live on minimum sleep as I feel like my mind is always racing. What's the best way to calm myself? Breathe, meditate, presencing practices. Notice where your thinking is at. Is it worst case? Is it thinking about the future? Bring yourself back to the now. Catch yourself doing it. And question 6. Anxiety makes me feel very edgy and I often snap at my partner when I'm feeling this way. I don't really know what brings about the anxious feeling. Who does that? Who's got anxiety running and they get really snappy with everyone? Yeah. Yeah. So the question says, anxiety makes me feel. Here's the answer. You don't feel something without thinking something first. But most of us are not aware that our thinking, most of us aren't aware of our thinking. We're only aware of the feeling that precedes our thinking. So this is the power of NLP, of showing us how our thinking works. Most of our thinking is done outside of our awareness. It's in those movies we talked about in our heads that are made up of all the sound bites, the self-talk, the visual, the snapshots. And a good example of that's a phobia. Most people think that they only experience a phobia when they have it in a felt experience. They go weak at the knees, for example, or heart races, but it's the thinking that comes first. The same is true for our anxiety. So becoming aware and bringing that into our understanding, we can now shift the movie. We can become aware of that worst case future as if it's really happening, which drives the nervous feeling, with that feeling of edginess. We can't change the thinking until we become aware of it. Yeah. Lots of questions, and there's some questions that have popped up in the chat box as well. And so we're going to try and get to those as well. We're going to try and get to some of your in-the-moment questions. And so there's a lot of information in 45 minutes, right? And the offer from here to you is that what NLP does is it offers you the opportunity to learn for yourself how to become resourceful and utilize your anxiety to identify your potential. It helps you do the work of clearing these, unresourceful, these crappy feelings out of the way so that you can get on with it. You can show up as a human being. You can wake up, so you can grow up, so you can clean up and show up. Wake up, grow up, clean up, and show up. Waking up is waking up to what's really going on for you, waking up, which is where you are right now, waking up that, hey, I'm not an anxious person. I do anxiety as a process. Yeah. Growing up is broadening your perspective, which is about those 5 steps that we're going to send out to you in email. Cleaning up is doing the work of clearing, and that's what NLP enables us to do through the use of all the NLP patterns that we use. And the showing up is for you to show up as in your fullest potential. And so NLP enables us to build this awareness, build the skills, to do the work, so you can show up in that potential, whether that's in a meeting, whether that's with your peers, whether that's with authorities that you normally wouldn't speak up, whether that's in finding your voice in a relationship, whether that's in public speaking. This is what NLP is. It's the container for you to do the work so that you can start to show up more fully in your life. Now, I'm so moved to share this with you because I used to think I labelled myself as an anxious person. I was so anxious I wouldn't dare ask a question at any of the NLP trainings I went to. I might get found out that I shouldn't be there. NLP enabled me to build that awareness, to build the skills, to do the work so I could show up in the true essence of my potential. Well, how'd we go? 6:15 on the knockout. Good job. So what questions do we have? A couple of questions, and then Lou's going to jump back in. She wants to talk about a couple of things with you. Great question from Penny in the chat. How does that work in fear of kids being hurt in your absence? Yeah. It's true, right? We worry as parents that the what ifs, the worst case, it's that you are future orientating about something that hasn't happened. So it's like, what is the worry? What's the positive intention of worrying? Yeah. It's like, is it about being prepared? Does worrying about what's going to happen with the kids make you more prepared? Or can you change your thinking? Can you nuance that without having to run this energetic experience of anxiety? No. What about when you have anxiety about something in the present that you cannot change? So that's from Anastasia. Great question. So speaking to that question, it may be that you're experiencing it in the present, but there's some future thinking about what does what's happening now mean for the future, is my guess. And there's a worst case happening with that. Yeah. Stress and anxiety, how are they different? Depending on how you experience them, what you label them. Some people may label stress as stress is an experience that you label. The energetic feeling in the body may be the same. It's depending how they are labeled. Stress can be happening because you're worrying not necessarily about the future. Stress can happen. You can have physical stress. You can have emotional stress on things that are happening outside of yourself. Then you can run anxiety about the stress you're experiencing. Does that make sense? Got one more question and then we'll have to wrap because we're a little bit over time. One more question if there's one more question. If there's not, anyway, I'm available to you if you want to connect at any time. We want to see you get into an NLP course. I'd love to see you there in a training. Lou's got some stuff that she would like to share with you as a group. Lou, you want to jump in? Awesome.
Okay, so just wanted to give you some information about some additional support. So we've been talking a lot tonight about NLP, Neuro-Linguistic Programming, and we have some courses next year. So there's an option for an online live course run by Mads, and that's in January and moves through to April. So every Tuesday and Thursday evening, 6 to 8 p.m. So perfect if you are working, you can do that in the evenings. We've also got a face-to-face course in Sydney for NLP. That's with our trainer, Jay, one of the managing partners. And that's 4 days in February and 4 days in March. There's also an option to have a personalised NLP course for your team. So if you work for a business, and this course is really to improve communication skills, and it will be created bespoke to what your needs are. The other options are some coaching, either one-on-one with one of the coaching room coaches, and there's also a matrix group coaching offer that launches in January. So look out for an email tomorrow with all of these offers and also a special offer for you for attending this webinar. So I wanted to say thank you for sharing your heartbeats with us tonight and for being here. And we look forward to seeing you on some of our courses and programs and staying in contact.
Good job. Thank you, everyone.
Good night. Thank you.